Right now, somewhere in the world, millions of people are experiencing an anxiety disorder. That number has risen every single decade for the last 60 years. We have more therapy, more medication, more meditation apps, more self-help books than at any point in human history, and anxiety is still rising. In 1095 AD, a man who was experiencing the worst mental breakdown of his life sat in a room in Baghdad and accidentally discovered the cure. He was not a psychologist. There were no psychologists. He was a philosopher, a scholar, a man who had built the greatest academic career of his era and then watched it destroy him from the inside. His name was Al-Ghazali, and what he discovered about the anxious mind is more clinically accurate than most of what psychology produced 800 years later. Abu Hamid Al-Ghazali was born in 1058 in Tus, a city in what is now northeastern Iran. By the time he was 33 years old, he had done something almost nobody in history has managed. He had become the most respected intellectual in the Islamic world. He was appointed head of the Nizamiya, the greatest university of the medieval era, in Baghdad, the intellectual capital of the known world. Thousands of students attended his lectures, rulers sought his counsel, and then it all collapsed, not from outside, from within. In 1095, at the absolute peak of his career, Al-Ghazali suffered what we would now recognize as a complete breakdown. He could not speak, he could not eat. He stood in front of thousands of students, and the words would not come. He later wrote, "I examined my motive in teaching and found that it was not sincere devotion, but the desire for fame and reputation." That single sentence of self-examination triggered something he could not stop. He left Baghdad, left the university, left his salary, his status, his reputation. He wandered for 10 years as a Sufi mystic, through Damascus, Jerusalem, Mecca, Medina, with almost nothing. And in that decade of inner silence, he discovered something about the human mind that nobody had articulated before. He wrote it all down in a book called the Ihya Ulum al-Din, 4 volumes, approximately 1 million words. And buried inside it is the most accurate framework for understanding anxiety that existed until the 20th century. Al-Ghazali's starting point was a question that modern psychology still has not fully answered. Where does anxiety actually come from? His answer was precise. He called it the diseases of the heart, not a metaphor, a clinical framework. He identified specific patterns of thought and feeling that generate anxiety and mapped them with a precision that would feel at home in any modern cognitive behavioral therapy session. The first disease he identified was waswasa, intrusive thought, the relentless mental chatter that generates worry without end. Al-Ghazali said waswasa follows a pattern. A thought appears. The ego grabs it. The ego inflates it. Suddenly, a small worry becomes an existential crisis. He identified the ego, what he called the nafs, as the amplifier of anxiety, not the source, the amplifier. The thought is the spark, the ego is the fuel. Modern cognitive behavioral therapy arrived at almost the same conclusion in the 1960s. Aaron Beck discovered that anxiety is generated not by events, but by the catastrophic meaning the mind assigns to events. Al-Ghazali wrote that in 1095. The second disease was riya, the need for external validation, the anxiety that comes from measuring your worth against what other people think of you. Social media was not invented in the 11th century, but Al-Ghazali described its psychological effect with perfect accuracy. The third was hub al-dunya, attachment to outcomes, the anxiety that comes from needing things to go a specific way, from being unable to tolerate uncertainty. Every modern anxiety framework identifies this exact pattern. Al-Ghazali identified it 900 years earlier. So what was his cure? 3 practices, applied in sequence. The first he called muhasaba, self-examination, a daily practice of examining your own thoughts, not to judge them, but to understand where they came from and what they were doing. He said most people never examine their own thoughts, they simply experience them as reality. Muhasaba interrupts that pattern. It creates distance between the thinker and the thought. Modern CBT calls this cognitive diffusion. Aaron Beck developed it in the 1960s. Al-Ghazali called it muhasaba. in 1095. The second practice was zikir, a deliberate practice of returning attention to the present moment, breaking the loop of anxious thought by anchoring in the immediate. John Kabat-Zinn developed mindfulness-based stress reduction in 1979. Al-Ghazali described the same mechanism 900 years earlier. The third practice was tawakkul. He said anxiety is ultimately generated by the belief that the outcome is in your hands, that if you worry enough, you can control what happens. Tawakkul means releasing that belief, not passivity, the full effort, and then the release of attachment to the result. Modern acceptance and commitment therapy identifies this as the single most effective intervention for chronic anxiety. Al-Ghazali wrote it in 1095. Every major school of modern anxiety treatment independently arrived at conclusions that Al-Ghazali articulated 900 years earlier. He had no neuroscience, no clinical trials, no peer-reviewed journals. He had only his own breakdown, his own recovery, and a mind of extraordinary precision. He discovered through direct experience what science took 9 centuries and billions of research dollars to confirm. Anxiety is not generated by circumstances. It is generated by the meaning the mind assigns to circumstances. And it can be interrupted. Al-Ghazali died in 1111. He was 53 years old. The book that emerged from his breakdown became one of the most widely read books in history. But Al-Ghazali said something about the book that most people miss. He did not write it because he had solved anxiety. He wrote it because he had suffered it more completely than almost anyone of his era, and had found a way through. The cure was not theoretical. It was the record of his own recovery. And it begins with the same question he asked himself alone in Baghdad in 1095. Why am I really anxious? Not what am I anxious about? Why? That question, honestly asked and honestly answered, is where his framework begins. And 900 years of human psychology have not produced a better starting point.